Welcome to the CEN show where we present the voice of the community. The CommunityEducationNetwork.com is a platform to aid the effort of self and collective improvement and continuous learning. We are back from a week's break and let's take a view of the website. So let's take a look here. I want to show everybody the website. So what I want to focus on the website tonight is the form. Now, we haven't been doing a lot of writing in here. So I think the last time I wrote something in here could have been in January or May. Okay. So now anybody that want to join this and start putting information inside there so we could talk about it, you got to log in and a sign up right here. All you got to do is hit that log in or sign up, and it's very easy to sign up or log in once you've signed up, and then you could post some good information for people to respond to and to talk about. All right. So now, I'm your host, Raski Mascani, and tonight's guest is Ronnie Roberts. This is his second visit, and his first appearance was very informative. And this evening, we're going to touch on critical race theory, among some other topics. All right. So good evening, Brother Ronnie. How are you this evening? And would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself here?
I am moved to California in 2000 and met Raskaki in 2001, teaching at Reed High School under one of his colleagues and good friends, Todd Irvin. We were teaching transitional ninth grade students, that were students who had failed eighth grade with 2 or more Fs. The majority, or I would say, was 50% Black and 50% Hispanic, with a few Asians mixed in, a few Filipinos. But the Black and Hispanic were the majority of any alternative school setting. And it's, as with any alternative school setting, it's more of an attendance behavior issue than academic issue. The kids are all behind academically because of attendance and behavior, but some of the most gifted students I've dealt with, and I've taught at regular comprehensive high schools, have been at these alternative schools. But they bring a host of other issues to the table, particularly lack of parental guidance and involvement. But Rigo and I taught there for a number of years, both math teachers. From there, I moved on to Reed High School to being the administrator for a couple of years and the dean for a couple more. And then I moved on to the Long Beach School for Adults, spent 3 or 4 years there as the dean and as a math teacher, and transferred and spent my last 6 years in Long Beach Unified working at EPHS, which is Educational Partnership High School, which is another one of the alternative options that Long Beach offers. So my entire career at Long Beach Unified was spent in an alternative school or an adult school setting. I also taught 6 years in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and at McLean High School, which was 90% Black, maybe even more, maybe 95, and was the lowest rated high school in the state, probably had the biggest number of gang members. And it was much like an alternative school in itself. So I spent my entire 26-year educational career working with what you would call at-risk students, per se. And it's been my passion. I would have rather been there. I had offers or opportunities to go to one of the comprehensive high schools, including firm offers at Poly, Cabrillo, Millikan, but I didn't want to leave because I thought I was needed most. As you and Brother Rob both know, being Black educators, Black male educators in particular, we are definitely a minority. So we do it with a passion and a love for our people. We do it to uplift our people, and then just not our people, but kids in general. You know, you don't go into education thinking you're going to make the lives of Black kids better or white kids better or Hispanic kids better, just kids. We're kid specialists. We're knowledge traders. We're code pullers, the whole 9 yards. But I retired in June of 2020 after a 20-year career in Long Beach and moved back to my hometown of Oklahoma City, where I haven't lived for 56, 57 years. It's been a big change, but then again, it's been pretty much the same. I moved in the middle of a pandemic, which everybody was on lockdown, so it wasn't that critical a situation for me. And not a lot of difference between living in Oklahoma City and living in Long Beach if you are pretty much into the routine that I'm into, which is really self-care at this point in my life. I recently had passed my 75th birthday, and you know, you kind of refocus when you get to this point. You look back on your career. I'm doing some sketchings of a book. I'm doing a lot of thinking in my head about what I want to put down. As usual, and as always, I'm trying to stay on top of what's going on in the world right now. As far as economics has always been my my main area of focus over education, because you know I majored in business administration in college with a minor in math, and worked for my first 23 years as an oil and gas accountant in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So I've always been a numbers man per se, and I've always been concerned about financial literacy for our people and creating generational wealth.
Okay, good. So,
And by the way, there's nothing greater than retirement. You agree with that, Brother Rob?
Yeah. I have a quick question.
Sure.
When you was in Long Beach, did you work with Theo Phelps?
Absolutely. Theo Phelps is a fraternity brother, man. He and I are both Kappas. Right. Theo was over kids who were just out of jail and kids who were on probation, and he ran the truancy center, and he worked hand in hand with D. Andrews.
Yeah.
So my exposure to Theo was early on. As soon as I got to Long Beach, I met Theo.
Okay.
And of course,
David Mead.
David Mead, good friend of mine. David Rigo, Ruscani, and I all worked together at Reed High School.
Okay.
I later worked with David at EPHS. I preceded him. He left EPHS at about the time I came there, but he came back and worked some during the summers. And you know, and David and I have always been great friends, as has Rigo. We're all in the same circle. Good men, both of them.
All right.
appreciate it.
I know all of them.
Likewise.
I mean, Theo opened up the Culture Center in Long Beach. Him and
what is Theo doing now?
he's dealing with some health issues, needs and back, but fishing and traveling. You know, he had money, so he had property.
Theo was an administrator in Long Beach.
He was.
The whole time I knew him, he was at the principal level.
Yeah, but I think his kids are doing so well. You know, he has a wife, I forget her name, but she graduated from SC, and she passed, ex-wife.
Yes.
Then he was with a couple of Long Beach women and stuff like that. And he's with this brother named Dadisi. And they opened up a culture center. But then, and this sister named Helen, I forget her last name. But they all work together on she got an African shop in Long Beach.
Okay.
Theo's
a good man.
Yeah, Theo's good. Theo's strong. You know, he started playing the drums and doing the dances and stuff like that.
Okay, you know what, Professor Ra? On the recommendations page, I may have that, who you talking about. And is it Shades of Africa?
No, that's another spot. That's on 4th Street.
Okay, that's on the recommendation page. And I have one more from Long Beach. And I don't think her name is Helen. Okay.
Well,
Right.
what is it? What is it?
The Euphorium Boutique.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's her shop.
It is.
Yeah, on Elm Street somewhere down there.
It's on 248 Elm. I can show it. Let me
Yeah,
see.
well, I said Elm Street, so that's it.
Okay, let's show it. Let's check it out.
She don't go by Helen, but that was her name.
It's right here.
Yeah, yeah.
Euphorium.
Okay.
Yep. Shades of Africa. This is our recommendations page.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. So now I want to also share before we get into critical race theory. I want to share this right here. It says critical race theory is an academic concept that is more than 40 years old. The core idea is that race is a social construct and that racism is not merely the product of individual bias or prejudice, but also something embedded in legal systems and policies. So I think that can drive our conversation about that. So, Brother Ronnie?
Well, you are aware of the fact that the term critical race theory, or as the academic folks like to call it, CRT, was come up with by a Black legal scholar by the name of Kimberly Crenshaw.
Crenshaw, yes.
Yes. She launched the Truth Be Told campaign to expose the harm that the order does. Critical race theory is, as you say, 40 years old, but it really came to the forefront with, of course, none other than Donald John Trump. In September of 2020, he issued an executive order excluding from federal contracts any diversity and inclusion training interpreted as spreading divisive concepts of race and sex stereotyping or race or sex scapegoating. So among the content considered divisive is critical race theory. And essentially what he's saying is, what that did is all of these corporations and organizations that did diversity training and inclusion for the employees and to improve the workforce, the productivity of the workforce, he barred these companies and any federal agencies or any company that was getting money from the federal government, which is most companies in this country, quiet as it's kept, from having these type diversity trainings and inclusion trainings for the employees, under the guise of the concept that if you taught our history, if you taught the fact that critical race theory, that discrimination is embedded into our legal and our financial and our spiritual or religious systems, which are all dominated by white males. So, in essence, we don't want to teach theories about separation or division or really highlight the horrors of slavery or to remind folks, particularly our young kids, we don't want them to feel guilty about what our ancestors did. So we want to, in essence, go in there and tell the academicians and the people in the schools, colleges, universities, preschools, K through 8, the whole 9 yards, we don't want to teach American history as it really is. Now, taking that a step further, I grew up in all Black high schools and an all segregated school system in Oklahoma City, and took history every year in high school and junior high school. We probably talked about slavery 1 hour in the whole years, my whole high school career. It just wasn't talked about. You know, and then you get to college, you take American history, 1865 to the present, and then on further. Well, of course, if you go from 1865 to the present, you're gonna run right into the slave trade. But so little time was spent on that. They threw out certain names, certain situations, percentages, things that we just didn't learn that even when I was in the university. And I graduated from HBCU. I went to Howard University, spent my first year there, spent a year and a half at Oklahoma State, and then 2 years at Langston University. I'm at HBCUs taking social studies classes and government classes, and this stuff never came up. We even had to take a civics class and an Oklahoma history class to graduate from Langston. And the Tulsa race riot was never mentioned, as I spoke to you before in an earlier podcast. So the whitewashing of the slave trade, which was the economic backbone of this country, which empowered and enabled white Americans to have generational wealth because they got free labor. They got Black people to build a White House, no charge. They got Black people to tend their crops, no charge. So on the backs of African Americans, this country was built, and then they make laws to us, you know, we're half of a man or 2/3 of a man, and then when they finally release us, they have the Civil War, which was whitewashed as states' rights from the people from the South, and states' rights had 16 mentions of slavery and keeping the Black man in bondage. That's about states' rights. So in other words, the South, or the Civil War South, or the pre-Civil War South, was intent on keeping Black people in bondage, not so much because they thought we were subhumans, but because we were free labor. I've always theorized that as horrible as slavery was, if you stop and take a look at the history of the white patriarchal society that we live under in this country and will be living under for some time now, I'm not even certain that these people were really even racist as much as they are just greedy and just want all the money and the power. I've often told people, and a lot of people don't know this, that most of the poor people in this country are white. 60 to 70% of the people receiving welfare checks in this country are Caucasians. The areas in the South and the Southeast parts of the country, you've never seen such poverty in your life. These are white folks. Have no money, no hope of getting out. And as I've often told my students, you think you're gonna really function in a society without being able to deal with Caucasians? And they're so mean and brutal to each other? It's just not gonna happen. So what is this critical race theory about? So when Trump did his move, the governors jumped right in, full-fledged. The governors of every state, and in my state particularly. In Oklahoma City, last fall, last September, and I had just been here a couple of weeks, they had this young Black history teacher on the 6 o'clock news on all 3 of the local TV channels, CBS, NBC, ABC. Articulate young black brother, maybe early 30s, was wearing dreads, had glasses, but he was talking about some race concepts. They blew it up to make him the boogeyman for critical race theory. Now they praise him as being an articulate young guy. They praise him as basically stating facts about the slave trade. But they didn't want their precious little white kids to be made to feel guilty because their ancestors beat and enslaved and raped us. And then perpetuated the system after they so-called let us free Juneteenth or whatever, emancipation. We still weren't emancipated because we didn't have any money. The 40 acres of the mule thing never materialized. So critical race theory is based on these institutional laws that they embedded into the system. First of all, you gotta, when you're looking at critical race theory, the number one construct, race is not biologically real, but is a social construct. There is no concept of race. There is one race on planet Earth, the human race. One. So this was a construct by white patriarchal men running the country who want to stay in power. Now, at some point, point number 2, we got to acknowledge that racism in America is normal because it's embedded into our institutions, it's embedded into our laws. Who's running this country? It's still white folks. And it's going to be that way for the foreseeable future. Because now, is it going to turn around? It's going to be a different set of white folks in the foreseeable future because the party of Trump and the Republican Party is dying. Why are they dying? Because their kids are not buying into that madness in the numbers to sustain them. The Republican Party has always been a minority in this country, my entire lifetime, and I've been here 75 years. They have always been a minority in this country, and in many places in this country, a minority of 2 to 1. But there's 2 institutions that keep the Republican Party whole and intact. Number one, the Electoral College, which gives small states big state power. You know, South and North Dakota, which don't have half the many people as LA has 4 senators and we got 2. Why is there a South and a North Dakota? I mean, they have between them not as many people as in the state of Oklahoma. We're talking about two states with a population of 4 million have twice the representation in the Senate as California with 40 million. So those 2 institutions alone will keep white minority folks in power for the foreseeable future. Our grandkids will see different, but we won't. We won't. How can South Carolina or North Carolina or South Dakota have 2 senators and California with 40 million people have 2? That's not equal representation. But again, that was based on slavery. They had to give the Senate to the South after they conquered and defeated them to make the nation whole. They had to make some concessions to the South. I don't know if a lot of people don't know this, but the Southern landowners got reparations at the end of the Civil War. When are we gonna get ours? Washington, D.C. printed money for them and gave them money. The Southern landowners who lost their slaves, they got paid.
Yeah, that's
You know, and you know, then there's one of the defenses that the white folk like to give for critical race theory is that, well, it's just a few bad apples theory. We got a few of us that are acting like this. Get out of here with that. Of course, there's a few bad apples. We got bad black apples, got bad red apples and brown apples. I mean, that's because we're humans and humans are flawed beings, but CRT is a systemic disease, literally. The critical race theory, the system is embedded with laws, morals even, customs, mores that keep the white man in power. And okay, should he be in power? He's the majority. Okay, I'll buy that. If we're a democracy and if we rule by the majority, I'll buy that to a degree. But then the Electoral College and the Senate refute that. The Electoral College and the Senate are definitely not about the majority. How do we win elections by millions and then lose the White House? The Electoral College, which was a bone that the North threw out to the South so they would retain some control. Or retain whiteness is what that's about. Now, get me, please. Let me say this. I'm not demonizing all whites in this country. I would never ever do that. I've known many really cool white people in my life. I don't have any inherent bias or prejudice against white people per se. I think most of them are just like you and me, Professor Ra, and they just want to raise their families and have a good life. But where they differ and where the right wingers and where the evangelicals differ from us is that they want to control our lives as well. And that's where I'm not having that. That's where I can't buy that whatsoever. You know, you don't get to tell me that I can't have an abortion. You don't get to tell me that I can't be gay. You don't get to tell me that I got to dress or act like you got to act or speak the King's English like you speak it. You don't get to do that. They want to impose their values on others because they think their way is the way. Well, their way is the way for them to stay in power and to keep all of the money. That's what their way is, basically.
That's right. Brother Doctor,
Yeah,
question, comments?
agree with everything you just said, man. No better way to put it. You know, yeah, no comment. I agree with everything you just said.
Okay. Professor Ra? Professor Ra,
I think you're muted.
he's muted, but I think he's talking to someone else.
Okay.
No, I'm good.
Right.
Question, comment, Brother Ra?
Well, you know, there are a lot of theories about race. And when you say theory, you know, it's mostly in the academic range or a social scientist perspective. And some individuals just come up with their definition of race and racism. Critical theory sometimes, even though, and I like the way Ronnie, Ms. Roberts have laid it out,
Right.
the history of it and how it came about. And, the whole concept of ideology to try to justify or explain racism when it's a practice that you can see, even if you can't put it just in a theory, you look at it and it has a lot of dimensions to it, hypothesis and things of this nature. But no matter, I understand, I appreciate, I think from a humanistic standpoint, Ms. Roberts is right about that there's only one race, the human race. But everybody don't act human. You understand? And so we got some challenges. That'd be nice. It's hard to tell the Klan when they got a rope around your neck. Well, we all humans, you know what I mean? Right. That ain't gonna work. Because humans are capable of good and bad. It's like we all are divinely chosen to come into existence to do good and bring good into the world if we choose to do that. We can also bring bad into the world. And when you start looking at critical race theory, European trying to block it, saying that you're teaching our kids to hate, teaching our kids things that they had nothing to do with, when they still doing it in a different way. You know, I mean, those that allow it, those that, they looking at the ones that's practicing it overtly. But as Martin Luther King said, it's not the actions of the ones that's doing it, it's the silence of the ones that are not trying to stop it or speaking out against it.
Absolutely.
And that's a contribution. It's like people focus on the white man, but at the same time, the white woman benefited and she didn't try to stop the white man. Mm-hmm. Those were her sons, her husbands, her brothers. So she just as much a part of it. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes she participated. So, we can argue and debate about the critical race theory in the classroom. But it's not the theory of racism that's the problem. It's the practice of racism that's the problem. And they don't want to get into that. So they keep it on an academic intellectual argument back and forward about the pros and cons of teaching it and not focusing on the practice of it. Because it's a global dynamic. Dr. Frances Cress Welsing and her theory on racism is about genetic annihilation. Dr. Richard King and his whole theory on the races and third eye and melanin, the pigmentation, that the enviness that the European have for our total being versus his feeling of inadequacy for the lack of melanin.
And swag.
And then there's Dr. Malachi Andrews, who wrote the book Psycho-Blackology, and his notion about racism, and that we are the model of humanity. And it's the envious thing that causes the European to focus on our penis and focus on our physical prowess versus his. That's why he created weapons to conquer the world, because he can't deal with it on a physical standpoint. And he spent all his mind that. And there is so much that they practice. And the imposition, even if you got the power and you violent and you have the weaponry, you can create any any position and make it real, because you can make people, punish people or reward people to practice it. So there was benefit. White folks even punished other white folks that didn't go along with racism.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, they call them in-lovers or pacifists or liberals, you know, left wing, you know. So, you know, I think that the critical race theory is something that you look at from an intellectual standpoint, and it's good to discuss it. But me, I focus on the practice, and that is that racism is a system of government and culture. Practice. And the government and the whole government is foundation is its militarism and its ability to factor you out if you don't go along with it or punish you. Racism is not them killing you, it's them creating laws and processes by which they can justify and get away with killing you. And you know, that's where justified homicide came from. Mm-hmm. Murder is murder, but then they came up with it, well, it's justified. Who says justified? Well, the one that did the killing. And that, and so I just think that we have to we argue that critical race theory must be taught about racism and all the various theories of racism. And you know that's why you're criticizing racism. And that's why they call it critical race theory. You're criticizing it, and criticizing it to a certain degree. They take it personal, and that's why they don't want it taught to their kids.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, that we're trying to stop it. And you're not going to stop racism by criticizing it, because people have criticized it throughout history and argued the same point Brother Roberts argued, that, you know, this is about humanity. And but when you have white evangelists and white people who say they're Jews, all of them practice racism. You know, because that's the foundation of their survival and they benefit from it. And, you know, it's hard for them to give it up. I mean, you know, unless you put them in check or develop the power to punish them for practicing it. And right now, there's no incentive for them to quit, to stop practicing racism. Matter of fact, it's more of an incentive for them to practice it more. Look who they elected for president of the United States. Look at the racist governments that's been elected across the country. That practice racism and believe in the inferiority of people. So that's all I got to say about it. But I really like what Brother Robert said, that, you know, humanity, there ain't but one race, human race. That's correct. And his in-depth research on the critical race theory, its origin, its history, that's good. When you in a classroom and you're talking about it, and when you leave that classroom, you better be conscious of it, because it ain't a theory when you go out there.
Absolutely.
All right.
It's real.
It's real.
It's real.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so see what I'm getting here is, if it's a practice, how do you counter that and change it? You know, that's the thing. Where does the change come in to bring about a new? I know Neely Fuller talks about a counter-racist code. So there's got to be some opposition to overthrow or do something about it. Brother Hembrick,
Sure.
question, comment?
Kind of tuned in a little late. I thought you were still out of town. I didn't get the beginning of it. But I hear this, how we and us and government, you know, I still, you know, take a position. You know, I don't suffer from the illusion of inclusion.
Yeah.
I love that.
We can talk about change and this and this and that. And like I stated on previous shows, you know, we behind enemy lines. And I don't know when, I haven't seen anything in history where a person has changed something, you know, being behind enemy lines, unless you take a guerrilla warfare mentality approach to it. So changing it is just a wishing and a hoping. But getting to, the humanity of man and, you know, African people versus European people, I like to refer to the book, The Iceman's Inheritance by Michael Bradley, which is an old book that shows, you know, the reason that the Europeans' mentality is like it is because where he grew up in that ice box, versus us, the sun people, you know, growing up in the sun, there's plenty to eat. They ain't worried about being cold. While they was up there freezing their kahunas off and looking for something to eat and beating this woman upside the head. Well, after thousands and thousands of years of that, you know, through DNA, you know, what kind of mentality do you develop? And that's what he is displaying. That's what he is. That's where he comes from. And he's shown that around the world once he finally rose up after the downing of the Africans, and then exploiting Africa and other parts of the world where Africans live, like Australia and Tasmania, Pacific Islands, all of that. You know, he came in and just did a job on those folks. And we gotta, you know, go back and look at the ones who came to America and the ones who went to Australia, which was called New South Wales at the time. You know, Europe was emptying their prisons, you know, getting rid of these folks. So they're tired of people. So they sent a lot of them to the United States and a lot of them to, you know, Australia and Tasmania. And you know, they tried to kill everybody. Tasmania, they succeeded. and also talking about him, I wrote down a question. What would the Native American think about all this? We ain't even talked about him. This was his land. You understand? And so he's standing there like they talk about all this theory, this and that. Look at what happened to us. You think it's gonna change? It's not. They will destroy it before they give it up. That's his mentality. They will blow it up instead of giving it up. That's just how he is. That's the only reason that a couple of million Afrikaners, can control all them Zulus down there in South Africa, Mount Atapa. It's just their mentality. It's in them. That's where they came from. And, like the brother said, yeah, there's a few good white folks and there's a lot of bad white folks, just like with any race. But when their position gets threatened, the horns will come out and they will do their thing to, in order to maintain their position. So
I think
that's it.
Okay. All right. Brother Ronnie?
Yes, sir. One of the things that I find seems like I've learned more about our people and Black history since I got out of college than I did in college, and it's just through reading and research, And I would quote some substantial facts to my kids in school, and they would be just astonished and say, "Well, you're wrong about that." And I'm really worried about Black kids, brown kids, and all kids because of this pandemic. We literally lost a whole year of school. This online education, this hybrid model that they've come up with is just killing our kids. And they have lost a full year of schooling because of a disease that has ravaged our country that orange clown in the White House could have contained, and we'd have 300,000 or 400,000 more Americans still living, but that's a whole nother theory. But speaking of critical theory, speaking of racism, speaking of just the overall economic state and the physical state and the moral state of Black Americans versus the reigning patriarchal white American men, whole different scenario. Touch on a couple of things. Number one, the reason that Donald Trump is still not the president is white suburban women. That's why we have hope in this country. White suburban women turned against Donald Trump and the Republican Party in droves because the noise, the out and out racism, the horrible language, the beating up on people. And if you stop and think about it, most of the people that Donald Trump dogs are Republicans. And he calls them rhinos, Republicans in name only. Anybody that doesn't go along with his madness is the enemy, including a lot of elite or establishment Republicans. But one of the critical facts is you stop and think about African Americans or American Blacks or Blacks in general. 12.5 million of us were stolen or sold out from under us in Africa. 12.5 million people were shipped to the Americas. Of that 12.5 million people, only 10.7 million made it. So approximately 2 million died during passage. Now, when they finally got to Jamestown or when they finally got to South Carolina, because 90% of the Blacks in this country came through South Carolina, only 388,000 were left here in the United States. And I tell kids that, I tell adults that, and they're completely shocked. Only 388,000, rounded off to 400,000. So maybe 4% of the Blacks were stopped in the United States. And a full 5 to 6 million went to Brazil alone and the South Americas. Our kids don't know this. And we got Black brothers all over this damn.
Cut the TV down.
All over this place. I mean, and I tell educated people that same number, only 388,000 of us stayed here in the United States. Now, once the slave trade got up and going, about 5 years in, Brazil shipped back, or they went and took them, the United States went and took them, another 150 to 200,000 of us. But still, less than 500,000 of us were made this great country what it is today. And now we've grown to what? What is our population in the United States? What are we, 12, 13% out of 300 million? What are we, would that give us 30 million people? 30 million blacks in this country from 388,000. So we've grown literally 100-fold, 1,000-fold, and we have carved out a place for ourselves in this hostile environment and are standing strong and standing tall. And they're friggin' scared of us. Brother Rob was just talking about that. Our physical prowess, our penis, our stature, our swag, they're afraid of us. Because we survived our women being raped, our families being separated, our men being sodomized and broken as bucks in front of their children, and our families being torn apart, us being, then when we got to the South, after we were free, we all of a sudden became strange fruit. They were hanging us from trees all over the country, the Jim Crow days, the Ku Klux Klan days. Now they're not doing it like that. They're electing racists into the White House who are electing and appointing race. The Supreme Court is now 6-3 conservative. That is purely madness in a country that's overwhelmingly Democratic. And it's a country that's overwhelmingly, as Brother Ross said, liberal, or more middle of the road to liberal. But we let a few folks with loud voices and the will, this is where they really get us, and more so than any other area. They vote. We don't vote. We don't vote. If just 5% more Black people had voted, there would have been no Donald Trump. If just 5% more Hispanic or brown people, eligible people who were eligible to vote, had gone to the polls to vote, there would be no Donald Trump. There would be no 6-3 majority of conservatives on the Supreme Court. So we're at fault here. We have some blame to do. And what we're doing here on the Community Education Network is trying to educate our young brothers and our young sisters, and even people our age, to at least go to the polls and try to make a difference. You know, a lot of our people will say, well, it's I ain't going to vote because there's 2 white men. They're not the same. There is a difference. I don't know Joe Biden personally, but I know for damn sure he's a hell of a lot better for me and my people in this country than Donald Trump. That just destroys that argument. We got 2 white men. Get out of here. That's ridiculous. But we have to get it into our people. Number one, we're not so unique and powerful, and we are unique and powerful because of who we are. What Brother Ross said at the beginning of the podcast, I wouldn't want to be anything other than a Black man in this country. I'm so proud to be a Black man. I'm lucky that I had 2 Black parents. Fortunate. Big time. Big time. I'm proud of that. I want to expound on that. I want to increase that. I want to pull more of us into that feeling. Because I think a lot of our kids, I don't know if they're ambivalent about their Blackness. They're ambivalent about really showing their Blackness. Other than from a negative standpoint. Be proud of who you are, because it's less than 500,000 of us made this country and made us what we are. You take us out of this country's a mess. They don't have the economic advantage that we gave them, allowed them to be the world's most dominant superpower. What other country got free labor? Now, slavery existed in Africa. Slavery has existed in every continent on planet Earth, but never was it exploited and used to make a great nation. And this is a great nation. This is a great nation simply because there were enough decent white people with vision to say and to understand that we're only as strong as our weakest link. So we got to bring these folks at the bottom up, at least to the middle, where we can have a better idealized thing that they did in the Constitution of a more perfect union, which is just a dream, and it's just not a reality that's going to happen in our lifetimes. I honestly believe that this country is headed for some great things because of our young people and because of the dying off of these races in the South and them losing their power. And the fact that their kids, through integration, through the internet itself, through knowledge, through going to school with us, through interacting with us, understand and know that we're no different than they are. Again, the key, getting us out to vote, making us aware. The key is we got to find some kind of way as educators and as Black men and as just American men to help our youth catch up on this year that they missed in school. Something's got to be done. School's getting ready to start here next week in some places, and the governor has said has a no mask mandate. And the Delta variant is running rampant in Oklahoma, which is less than 40% of the population has had a shot because this is a red state. And now they want to go back to school. And the governor says no mask. That is pure. I don't understand that. But he's a Trump Republican. This is a Trump state. Trump won all 77 counties in the state of Oklahoma. Oklahoma City, Oklahoma County, and Tulsa County, where probably 80% of the Blacks in the state reside, were close. They were both around, he was within, 49 to 45, like that. It was very close, but the rest of the county is overwhelmingly Trump country. Well, these folks are not necessarily racist. They're just trying to hold on to their way of life. Does that make them racist? Yeah, probably, to a degree. Because like Brother Ross said, if you're silent about a problem, you're part of the problem itself if you don't speak out. So suburban white women change the nature of the White House. What is the next step? The next step is getting the kids. The kids came out to vote like never before. And they weren't particularly thrilled about damn near 80-year-old Joe Biden. They just wanted to get 75-year-old Donald Trump's fat orange ass out of the White House. See what I'm saying? They're not thrilled about Joe Biden. I ain't either, for that matter. I'm a lifelong Democrat. I could have thought of 25 other Democrats I would have rather had to be president than him, but I wanted him to be the nominee because he was the only one that could win. And he's a good man. But am I enthused about him? He's older than me. I don't think anybody older than me should be in any position of power like that. Ever.
Yeah. But I want to get back to what you were talking about, that the kids lost a year of school.
Mm-hmm.
And I taught for the whole school year. And what I did was I made it where the students were almost like they were in the classroom, because I didn't change too much of anything. I still was able to have them do work as if they were in the classroom. And I think where a lot of educators kind of panicked, they depended on new ways of teaching that they didn't know about, when you could have taught like you've been teaching the previous years.
It was just on the computer.
Just manipulating the technology to where it's almost as if the kids were in the classroom.
Right.
So I think a majority of the students that attended my class were able to still get a wealth of curriculum taught to them because I was able to do the same exact things I was doing as if they were there. And I think as educators look to improve their craft, I think that's something they need to look at.
Absolutely.
They need to look at how they could, you know, do that, be able to teach as if the kids are in the classroom. And I was able to pull that off. And I'm not bragging or anything, but it worked for me and it worked for the students.
But
The majority of them, you know, passed the class as if they were there. You know, I didn't have too much difference than I had the previous years.
right. Well,
So yeah, I wanted to kind of
that's
put that in
amazing.
there.
But I want to comment on what you just said. What you said and the way you taught your classes was probably not the way that the board folks wanted it to be done, because they wanted to come up with all these new ways. They tried Zoom, they tried Google Classroom, and they came up with some new term they got in Long Beach. I'm sure Compton has their own new name for it. But they wanted to reinvent the wheel and have teachers teaching and delivering lessons in a fashion that they had never done before. And what you did, making it more like what they were already doing, was probably the real key. But they're so into manipulating and wanting you to do this new system that they come up with, or this new system, that the kids are falling through the cracks. What they're not acknowledging is that, your class may last an hour or 45 minutes. How many kids are disciplined enough to sit there and do that 5 more times during the day, 4 more times during the day, and sit there for an hour? How many kids are disciplined enough to look at that screen for a minimum of 5 hours a day? Because they got 5 classes. Or is it 6? It's 6 classes, really. We're the ones with 5 in a conference. We got 6 different classes.
Well, we actually moved to a 7-period. We had a 7th period.
Right. So how many of our kids are disciplined enough, have the space, have the computing capability, and then have an area that's free of distractions for 4 or 5 hours a day? That's pure madness. And in households with 4 or 5 kids, which many of our families have, do they have 4 or 5 computers? Because that's exactly what you need.
Yeah.
Correct?
Our district was able to get every student a computer. So
ours was too.
Yeah, so
Every student that wanted one.
well, yeah, well, no, they actually every student had one,
Mhm.
and if they had any issues, they could bring it back in and get another one.
Right.
And it's kind of funny what you're saying, because I could hear some of my colleagues teaching as I was teaching.
Right.
Because there's more than one student in that household that attend our
Absolutely.
school.
Absolutely.
So it used to be funny to be able to hear the other teacher teaching, and
Yeah.
I had a few teachers say, "Man, you was loud." I said, "And you were too."
Yeah. I mean, do the families have room for 3 or 4 computers in the house at one time? Do they have the bandwidth to accommodate that on their the Wi-Fi internet connection? Do they have the space where the kids can sit down and concentrate in a distraction-free area? I mean,
Yeah, it was a challenge.
The logistics of that are just so overwhelming for our kids. So overwhelmingly negative.
Yeah,
So
well,
overwhelmingly negative.
I had to make it. I had to make it work.
Because you're an innovator.
I had to
You
make
made
it
it work
work.
because you're an innovator and you're willing to do what is necessary. And I'm sure that you think you could get 100% support from the Board of Education the way you delivered your lessons, and they wanted it done this way and that way with this system and that system. They want you to follow these pacing charts, which are just the most insane things in the world. You got to teach to the kids where they are, not where you want them to be.
Yeah.
It's always been my theory, but whole different thing.
Yeah.
But I commend you for your efforts. I commend you for being bold enough to give your kids what they need, rather than what the education boards think they want and how they want to deliver.
Yeah, well, you do
You've
your
always
best.
been a rebel.
You do your best with what you have.
That's what
Brother
you got to
Doctor,
do.
Brother Doctor, what do you think about the kids,
Yeah.
the kids in the online learning situation this past year?
I wasn't too much of you guys. You guys are there front line. Um, so I really have no comment on it. I had to deal with it. I know when I went to school, I got my degree, my bachelor's degree, mostly, I think 50% online. And I went to Cal State Chico online, but it was kind of different. You had to be, most of the professors there, you had to be live online in class, and they will call on you while you're online. But like I said, I really didn't pay much attention to it. So you guys more on front line can, make a better comment on it. So I really don't have no comment on it.
Okay, so I'm the only one that's still active. Everybody on here is retired except me. All right, Professor Ra.
Yeah,
Online
bro.
learning.
I have a lot to discuss, and I'll get back to the education part in a minute. But I want to go back because and appreciate what Brother Roberts said, and if I understand correctly, and I really like his analogies. But I just want to just suggest some things that there are plenty of people that, first of all, sometimes the system makes you think you're not progressing or not doing things that you are doing because they have that power of not putting it in the news or just creating an atmosphere whereas we don't really know how to. That's why we take statistics and research in sociology and psychology, but it's their research and their sociology and their psychology that we're getting statistics and data on, and we don't have the statistics and data on our own history. When it comes to voting, there's no racial group that have a higher percentage of voting in a Euro-American politics than Black people. If it wasn't for them, you wouldn't have those two senators, a Jewish and a Black one out of Georgia. It was Black people in Michigan. It was Black people in Pennsylvania. It was Black people in Wisconsin. And that's the reason Biden won. Don't be for the Black people in South Carolina, where he won his first primary. He gave credit to the Black voters. The reason can more Black people vote? Yeah. Should more Black people be politically conscious? Yeah. It wasn't just to get white people out of the get Biden, get Trump out. They also was voting for their interests. They turned the Congress in the 2018 and 2020. And that was Black voters. Black voters was the one that put Obama in office. 45% of white folks voted for him. 95% of the Black people that voted for Biden. Voted for Obama. You got a Black woman vice president. Now, holding them accountable, as Brother Robert said, is an issue. Should our people be more politically conscious and educated from birth all the way through life? Yes. But you forget how, just like they're trying to suppress Black votes in the next election, you can imagine the historical process of blocking Black people from voting who wanted to vote. It's like Black people looking for jobs and they get turned down so much they stop looking. That's what happened to Black people when they come to voting. You know, count the jelly beans. You can't recite the Constitution. All kind of methods to suppress Black and people of color vote. You see it's being played out. If our vote if we weren't voting, they wouldn't have to pass suppression law. But that's why they're doing that. Black people struggle. They created the most global movement after George Floyd, but it really started in Ferguson with the Black Lives Matter movement. We are the moral vanguard of the world. People borrow our songs, they borrow our phrases, they borrow our moral arguments for justice all over the world. All over the world, we are a model of struggle against. On the continent, where racism and ethnic conflict amongst ourselves is rampant. But there's a different fight for the Black people in South Africa or on the continent than our fight here. Here we are fighting against majority rule. Over on the continent and in some Caribbean areas, we're fighting over minority rule. So our strategies is different. And one thing Hemrick always bring up, the role of religion that neutralizes many of our people to deal and forgive white folks for their atrocities and don't get into the reality of uniting as a racial group to combat white racism. We keep thinking we can reason this man out, but as Roskani said, hey, it's gonna be struggle. It's gonna be conflict. You may think it ain't. You may think you can pray your way out of this. You may think you can talk your way out of this. You may think you can reason your way out of this. You can go with critical race theory and your way out of this. It ain't going that way. It's gonna come through struggle. Every inch we got in this country came through struggle. Through struggle. Now, did some white people struggle with us? Yeah. Did some white people marry Black people? Yeah. Did Black people? Frederick Douglass married white women. Marcus Garvey's son married white women. Kwame Ture Stokely married white. Bobby Seale, Eldridge Cleaver dedicated his whole book, Soul on Ice, to a white woman. Huey Newton was hanging out with that white girl, Ford, whatever her name is, up in the penthouse. You understand? You married Turner. Yeah, we have Black people. Even Imamu Baraka, he married a white woman, and that's his daughter is on the radio. You understand? But the point is, we ain't talking about them. We ain't talking about them that want to cross color lines and jump in the bed with each other. That's it. We're talking about systemic racism where white folks can say, I'm not a racist personally, but your damn system you built is. You can't argue that a spider web is messed up. You got to deal with the spider that made the web. And that's why it's messed up. Now, when it comes to education, that's a whole new different game because the foundation of education comes from the home. The problem is that's the primary educational unit. That's where you learn to talk. You went from crawling to walking. You know what I'm saying? You learn to eat. You learn to wash and clean yourself. But you have to also learn how to understand the world you're in. And many of our parents instilled fear. But what Rascani going through and what you went through at Poly and Long Beach, you have a large percentage of your kids were homeless or in foster homes. There's no regulation of Black foster homes or minority foster homes, where if your kids ain't graduating, you can't take no more kids. You know, if your kids ain't productive, you can't, if your kids messing up in school, you can't have them. We'll find a home where they're getting support and they're getting love. Holding our Black politicians, sellout, chitlin, omelet-eating Negro politicians accountable. You're right. When are we gonna hold them accountable? When are we gonna see their taxes? When are we gonna see their voting record? When are we gonna see them in regards of their ideology and their philosophy? We have some Black people that's conservative. You got a dude in Oklahoma, I think his name was Watts or something. You know, Black people in the South came up as Republicans. J.C. Watts or whatever his name is.
Yeah, that's J.C. Watts.
Yeah, you know, he was a Republican. Talking about that, all of them come up, almost all these Negroes, daddies were preachers. I mean, just dig their history. And then when Black people stand up, they criminalize it. Adam Clayton Powell, Martin Luther King, every Black leader, Charles Diggs, the brother that was in Katrina, they indicted him, made the mayor. He went to prison. Mm-hmm. And everybody think, because the white man say you break the law, you done broke it. It's just like they own Como for messing with women. They had a year, less than a year, they found all the evidence they wanted, allegations, not none, just allegations. They didn't put a investigation on Trump. He talked about grabbing their coochies. He got accused of rape. They didn't say, let's start a commission to determine the credibility of the women. Matter of fact, they discredit the women that accused him. They said they wanted his taxes, they got his taxes. What's taking New York so long? And I agree with you about Biden. He's just as hypocritical as the rest. Because, he gonna jump up there and he criticized Black people, he criticized Democrats, but he ain't said nothing about Manchin, he ain't said nothing about Trump. You understand, as far as the reality of his Justice Department, they ain't did nothing. The man, look at all the white people that let him go that created the insurrection at the White House. If you would have stood up in a crowd and told them people, go kick ass, do what you got to do, you'd still be in prison. You understand? So I want to hear, these white folks want, they playing games. But Elijah Muhammad said, they're the masters of trickeration.
No doubt.
And I believe it. But I just want to say education is about loving the students and about teaching them that don't want to learn to want to learn. And as Brother Hemrick do, and as Brother Rascani do, and as you did, Robert, you try to drop some sacred knowledge on them. After you cover the subject matter, you got 5 or 10 minutes on a rainy day, you try to give them some knowledge about life. Because their true test is not on that paper, not on the ACT, not on the achievement test. Their true test is, are you gonna make it in life as young men and young women? And that's what you don't want them to fail at. The hell with failing math. The hell with failing English. Hell, half our parents couldn't do that, but they were hard workers.
Yep.
It's failing in life. That's all I got to say.
Real talk, brother Rob. Real talk.
That was a mouthful.
That was.
You got
Real
excited
talk.
there, brother Rob.
I'm
Okay,
sorry,
Henrik, online education the past year. Anything on that or any comment, any question you have for me? 'Cause I'm the only one that actually was teaching.
I have my thoughts about the system, period. It's job training. It's not education. Job training. You know, education is something you got to do for yourself.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, they devise the curriculum. It's all about them, even when you look at that. So, you know, you have to educate yourself, I believe. As long as a person can read and write and, you know, do a little math, I used to tell students, you don't need a teacher. You can go to the library and educate yourself. But the fact that our kids are not learning what they need to learn to survive out there, first, you know, find out about themselves, and then, you know, drawing on examples of our people in the past to apply to today. That's what I think our kids need and our people need. And just like Ross said, you know, I don't trust no preachers, politicians, and pimps. I put them all in the same category.
Real talk, brother. Real talk.
You know, they just exploit, they only show up to make $1. And whenever we start to roar about what's happening, you know, those are the ones that are appointed to calm us down. And it's always been that way. And I put Brother King at the top of the list. You know, I commend the brother for sacrificing his life, but I was on the other side of the wall with that. And just to talk about, you know, some things that we were doing prior to the civil rights thing coming on the scene. You know, the things we were doing, the things we owned. You know, we were kind of, you know, we had our own stuff going on. As far as, you know, occupations, and, you know, we was making shoes, lumber yards, brick yards, the farming, all that. And we gave up our hotels, movie theaters, you name it. And in a sense, we kind of gave it up to sit next to white folks and drink a cup of coffee in the restaurant, so to speak. So, you know, my thing is getting back to, you know, what we were doing. And that's the only thing gonna save our kids, if we develop some things so they can sustain themselves. All other groups are doing it but us. And that's something we need to get to in a hurry. But, you know, they got us tripping in their value system. You know, just for example, you know, the thing that just passed, the 4th of July. How many Black people fully participate in that and spend a bunch of money in that? Just take all these European holidays that we participate in. Those funds can be, you know, utilized to create something. We need to create something that's ours. And then, you know, we have to be able to protect it, because whenever we've done it in the past, they move on us. So, you know, those are areas I like to focus on, because I know this other way, we can talk about us and we and all that, ain't gonna happen. I don't give a damn how many decades go by. And I also want to commend the brother talking about the, you know, the early slave trade. I tell people that slavery was going on in South America for 150 years before it ever came to the United States. And Brazil is the area where they took, you know, most of us. And so, but you know, I'm like with the Garvey movement. I think that's a good focus for us in terms of historical stuff that we could draw upon. I think the The Philosophy and Opinions of Him. That book is a good read. It even talks about what to do with these corrupt jokers, which I was really overjoyed when I heard that in Garvey's book. Is when you catch a corrupt person, you know, they had it in their bylaws that they would not only kill them but kill their family members. So
Wow.
keep a person on point from, you know, being so corrupt as we can be whenever there's a bunch of money on the table. Anyway, that's why I like to put our focus. We have to learn about that. Our kids need to learn about that. I love what the young brother stood for. Matter of fact, I never heard of him until he got killed. Nipsey Hussle. Seemed like he was trying to go that way. And like I said, I, in my opinion, that's the only thing gonna save us. As long as we participate in this man's system and trying to play by his rules and the platforms and stuff that they got up in programs is gonna end up like it always ends up. The joker's gonna run away with the money and the people that are supposed to you know, to receive the funds ain't gonna get jacked. That's what it's always. And so we need to, you know, we need to just wake up and just do for self. I love that Body Lies Behind. There was two things I agree with him on that, and who he think the devil was. I agree with him on that part too. That's the only one I see is that Blue Ivan running around here. But oh man, you know, that's about it. I'm just stuck on that because from studying history, I know whenever you follow, you know, your conqueror's program, you're just like a dog chasing his tail. And we can talk about how much work we put in here and all this and that's fine, and we did. And you know, we're of a great humanity, and like Dr. Clark used to always say, sometimes your greatest attribute, which is our great humanity, can be your biggest demise. And through these preachers and other value stuff they got of society, we always want to forgive, turn the other cheek, and well, they all ain't that bad and all of that. But first, we got to deal with ourselves. We need to get our stuff together. And until we do that, I think we're just farting in the wind. But I'm sure Brother Rod has something to say about that. But anyway, that's just my perspective. And you know where my mind is. We need to get with African stuff and start calling it what it is, African, you know, or Kemetic or whatever we want to call it. Because you know the term black, like they say, you know, it tells what we look like, but it doesn't say who we are. Until we can tie land and culture to that description, we're actually calling ourselves out of our name, as far as I'm concerned. So, you know, but we need every little piece. We don't only need, you know, WB. We need Booker T. Washington. We need Garvey. We need Elijah Muhammad. We need Malcolm. We need King. Draw all from all those examples and put something together that exclusively us, and quit letting other folks inside the door making decisions for us and helping us to make decisions that don't look like us. That's it.
Right, Brother Ronnie?
Just loved all those comments, Brother Hendrick. I can't, I had to write down what you said. I don't suffer from the illusion of inclusion. I think a lot of our young people have been sucked in to think that they are a part of the system. Now that they have freedom to go and eat anywhere they want to go, they can spend their money anywhere they want to spend it. Because they live in their communities, the foot that the white man has on their neck is not as visible or is not as painful to them right now, while they're still under the guidance of their parents and their economic needs are being met by their parents. But when they turn 18 and get out of school or whatever, that harsh reality is going to come full force and hit them dead in the face, that they're not part of the system. They're the disposable part, or the part that has the foot on its neck, and that it will be there unless they, and the only way to conquer that and get that foot off of the neck is through education and making yourself a better human being. Education is not just about the mind. We don't send kids to school every day and keep them there all day just for the book part of it. It's about developing your social skills so you can get along with people in society, so you can work in diverse groups. All of the educational pedagogy nowadays is about collaboration and working in groups, which is necessary to work as an adult. You know, I worked many years with Wisconsin, and we, you know, there were always meetings going on among us as a faculty about how to get better, how to teach better, how to get along with our kids better, how to improve our classroom management techniques so we could concentrate on the subject matter. Always in mind, keeping in mind, making us better so we can make the kids better. You know, that's one of the beautiful parts about education, and Professor Rock can expound on this as well, is that we as educators are constantly re-educating ourselves. And not only are we learning from the books and the collaboration with each other and soaking in each other's ideas in the seminars and the workshops that we go to, we're also learning from the kids. If you're an astute educator, you learn from the kids how to teach them. You learn from the kids what areas you need to focus on to bring them out of their shell and make them better. You learn from the kids how to connect real world situations with the stuff in the textbooks so they can make some sense out of it, you know? So you gotta be and then more so than anything, we learn from other teachers. One of the things I like to do as a classroom teacher was go to some of my colleagues' room during my planning period to steal from them their knowledge, their ideas, their approaches. You know, we all have the same basic knowledge, but we deliver it in different ways. We as a math department, and we used to have math department meetings that are, we would be in, and it's just an exchanging of ideas with the end result being, I'm gonna be a better teacher and I'm gonna produce a better student. And more so than producing and as well as producing a better student, I wanna make a good human being who can, number one, critically think. Number two, have humanity and love for his brother. And all peoples for that matter. And number three, to try to make a mark on society other than something negative. You need to, if you can get through school, if you can have parents well off enough to get you to school and get your high school diploma, and even in some rare instances, get you through college, you owe something back to your people. All of us guys with education, with the knowledge that we have on this forum, we owe these kids. Not only do we owe these kids, we owe their parents. And we owe society because we are educators. And it's a debt that we're more than willing to pay and that we love paying. It's our life's work, it's our life's blood. You know, there was no moment I ever experienced in a classroom as great as that moment when that light bulb came on in that kid's head and he saw how to work this particular math problem. Or even the light bulb came on his head, how he saw how to get along with his older brother. Or I used to talk to kids about, hey, dude, you gotta respect your mom. You know, one kid was complaining about his mom got all kinds of different men coming in and out of the house. Well, your mom is going through hell. Your dad is locked up. She's trying her best. Don't too harshly judge her, because without her, where are you? What you got? Where you gonna live? Where you gonna eat? What them Nikes you got on? Where'd you get them from? So just, you know, education just is not about the books and the classroom. It's about the whole person. You have to educate holistically. You got to look at the whole human being and attack him from head to toe to try to pull him up by his bootstraps so he can come and do what you're doing. You know, I want my kids to be teachers. I want my kids to be code pullers. I want my kids to spread knowledge. And so if this knowledge spreads throughout our community and becomes infectious, it brings the whole entire community up. It brings their awareness level up so they can look around them and do critical thinking. So they can look around them and say, hey, my vote counts. So these young Black brothers walking on our streets and out at night can say, this guy looks just like me. He might have on different colors. Why am I killing somebody that looks just like me? That's teaching critical thinking skills and bringing out the better side of everybody's humanity, because there's good in all of us and there's a bit of evil in all of us. And it's a balance, you know, you're trying to just make people better, make people more aware, and make people be able to use their heads to do critical and creative thinking. That's
Real
it.
talk. That's real talk. Real talk. So is there any other subject you want to discuss tonight, or you want to close for this evening?
I'm pretty much tapped out. We talked about the things I want to talk about, and it's always my thing is the development of Black and brown people obviously is at the top of my agenda, but the betterment of society as a whole is at the top of my agenda. I'm as much as interested in educating white folks as I am our people, because they hold the key to making this a more perfect union. Because the old adage of those with the gold make the rules, well, they damn sure got the gold. And they're damn sure making the rules. But we need to get enough of them in there to make some rules to benefit us all. We need to be able to show and make them understand that you're only as strong as your weakest link. You need to pull us up to make you even better. I'm out.
Brother, I just want to close, Rusky. There's so many organizations, and we have like people are vaccine hesitant and vaccine against it. Many Black people don't want to be in organizations or support organizations. The two elements that we got to educate our people to from the home, because they're not going to do it at school, is there from a standpoint about religion, the role of religion as a mind control and spiritual controlling factor that neutralizes you, and you think that your only role in life is to try to get into into heaven, and that's it. The second is every human being came from a mother and father, and that is two species halves coming together. This gay movement is a threat to our population, because Black people some young Black people are buying into bisexuality, homosexuality, and all kind of Eurocentric dynamics other than heterosexuality and power and what they call nuclear families. Raising Black men to get married and have children and raise them children to be warriors and be politically conscious and active is a challenge. Raising mothers, even if they have a man or not, to be conscious. The biggest members of the churches is women, and they give a lot of money. But we have we have to stay optimistic. Look at our victory. Don't never think that we aren't on the move.
Oh, yeah.
This sister that stayed out there in front of the White House and spent the night just to draw attention to homelessness and voter suppression. And Renner renter needing to pay people rent. It wasn't just for Black people, as Brother Robert said, it was for all humans, but our struggle is connected to the human struggle because we, as he said, there ain't but one race, the human race. But it's gonna be struggle. Frederick Douglass said it. You want us to progress, you got to struggle. Y'all struggle with students to get them to progress. I've been in this struggle since 1965. I'm 73 now. That's 55 years. This is not something that all of a sudden I became conscious 10 years ago. I'm not a member of a specific organization, but I support a lot of them. I support a lot of progressive churches. I mean, they call me to speak. I pray with them. I do all that. And, you know, but I try to drop some consciousness on them when I can. And I'm just saying that, you know, this country fought Afghanistan 18 years because they had the money and the weapons, and they lost. They lost in Vietnam. Hades is fighting them right now. You understand? There's struggle going on. I've been going to a monthly luncheon for 8 years with the BCCLA, Black Clergy Labor, Black Community Clergy Labor Association, for 8 years. For over 8 years, they have met every Wednesday at 8 o'clock in the morning. Then they have a luncheon at the end of the month. There are Black people doing things. The Black Lives Movement, Black Lives Matter movement is a strong movement. Is that okay, Roski? Okay, spirituality, I see it.
Yeah, this
So
is what
I'm just saying that,
Professor Rob, let me just
yeah,
interrupt for a second. This was an excellent, what you say, a lecture or a speech that you gave at the church.
yeah.
And that's what you were speaking about. You speak at churches. This was awesome. One of the best I've heard. So I encourage people to see, you know, I wanted people to see that. And then I'm gonna share uh, Ronnie's but go ahead, Rob. I'm gonna share Ronnie's
No,
also.
well, I just want to say, Brother Ronnie, you have a wealth of knowledge. And I wish you well in educating some white people that will listen to you. And you know, if you can get them, fine. You know, we struggle the way we see it. I can't criticize anybody for what they do. You know, that's what we ain't got time for that. You know, I'm working with various groups and various organizations. You working with yours, and that's it. You in the South, I'm up here on the West Coast, which is the worst coast, and we struggle. We struggle. You know, 7% of the population. You know, I mean, it's a beautiful thing. I love it. I love to get up in the morning and see Black people and working with Black people. I look forward to it. I don't know what I'd be doing if we didn't have a struggle going on. You know, I work with Farrakhan. I work with all of them. If you I'm for all resistance to the system and to the evilness of the system. Do that mean we don't enjoy the pleasures of the system? No. It don't mean that. It just means constant struggle all the time. All right, that's it.
All right, this is the first show that Brother Ronnie did, and he was titled Ross Ronnie. Very excellent show. Encourage people to see that also.
All right.
So I want to thank everybody for participating tonight, Brother Ronnie. Wonderful as usual. Looking forward to you being on here again.
I will be.
You are scheduled to come on the 25th if you want to do it. So hopefully you do. So that's
the 25th of this month.
yeah, you scheduled again. So
Okay,
if you want to do that, we're good with that.
okay,
And
August 25th, I got it.
yeah, so next week we got Brother Thomas, and it's he's gonna continue with part 2 of his what to do when stopped by law enforcement. So that should be pretty interesting. His first one was he has some ideas for people, especially black people, when you're being stopped by the law enforcement, how to react and then come out of that safely, because that's what we need to do when we're stopped by the police. We need to leave the situation alive. So that should be interesting. So I'm gonna say each one teach one, and I appreciate everybody this evening. Keep coming, and you know, as Brother Cambon would say, Black liberation. Yes, yes. So
Peace
each one teach one. Have a good evening, and on Monday we got Professor Ra and Joe Hembrick, Conscious Corner.
All right, I'll let you know who the guest's gonna be in the morning.
All right.
Hold on a second, brother. Scotty, I tuned in late, but I don't know if we mentioned the transition of brother Renoka Rashidi.
Rod did mention that before we started recording, but go ahead. You could speak a little bit about him, and Brother Goss passed away too.
God.
Yeah, Paul Goss. What's his name? Is it Paul Goss? Rod?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
Rod's already covered it, so that was it. I just wanted to make sure, that, and I'm sure he did that. Just knowing the kind of brother Rod is, I figured that's what he started off with. So he already handled it. So that'll.
Well, that was before the recording, so you want to mention the brother?
Yeah, well, world-renowned historian, Renoka Rashidi. I had him speak at schools, down over the years while I was working. Matter of fact, we tried to get him on the show here a couple of weeks ago. Brother wrote several books. One of his recent books is called Black Star Over Asia, which he did with Ivan van Sertima, which is a great read. Talks about the early presence of African folks in Asia, which I had it all around the world except that. So that book kind of cleared that area up for me. And he was working on a current book, a big old a picture book about photos that he's taken in museums around the world. I don't know if that's out yet, but anyway, good brother. I had him come to Roosevelt to speak, Centennial, Compton High, and Davis Middle School down through the years. So just want to mention his passing and the work that he was doing. And he was over there in Kemet when he made his transition. So I'm sure he's right where he wanted to be when that came about. So
Appreciate that. Yeah, and Brother Paul Goss, Dr. Paul Goss, New Earth store in Compton, a health food store,
Okay.
herbalist.
Yeah. New Earth Health Food Store.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
Dr. Paul Goss, he passed away. Give thanks and praises for his great work,
Right.
helping many people in the areas of natural healing.
I'm
So
definitely.
hats off to those two great brothers, and may their work linger on through us all. All right. So I'm gonna say good evening, everybody.
All right, peace.
Good evening.